up?
Hello and welcome to the Internet of Things podcast. My name is Zaman and I am joined today by Kanwar and Harpreet.
Hello, hello
Howdy,
guys.
howdy, guys.
We would like to thank our audience today for joining us on a very important topic which affects a lot of people in today's society. We will be discussing the security and the development of security in IoT devices. This topic may not be heavily discussed in the world. However, it is an important factor for everyone to know what the developments are in their IoT devices, as it affects a huge population of the world around us. Now, you may be wondering what are some devices and that should be protected and how they protect you. Preet and Kunwar, did you want to think of any IoT devices that people may have in their homes?
Yeah, security cameras.
Yeah.
Microsoft, or sorry, it's Amazon Alexa, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like the Echo devices.
Yeah. Hmm.
Can
Just
we think of any other devices?
And I mean the smart locks.
Yeah.
maybe the Google Home devices, Echo devices, and what are those devices they're called? Smart bells.
Yeah, so those are all very um like regularly used devices that a lot of people now have in their homes. So just from those devices, we can see the importance of security development in them. As with the example that was said by a smart lock, we would not want anyone to just break into a smart lock and access a home
Yeah,
because
no one
that,
would like that.
yeah. So there needs to be proper security developments in these devices. So throughout this podcast, we will take a glimpse into the development of the security standards and how they differ throughout the world and what is used to protect these devices, but more importantly, to protect you. As most people would have an IoT device, it is important to know the security standards which are put into them and how they have been developed in Canada, but throughout the international borders.
Zeman,
Yeah.
can you tell us something more about those IoT security standards that you were referring to?
Yeah, for sure. So you may be wondering, like as you said, about the standards and where do they come from. So if you look in like a plain dictionary, the meaning of security is to be protected against any threats, which is what we see the development and the security standards in the IoT devices should be capable of. So currently, IoT standards are regulatory standards, which are issued by a reputable and widely accepted organization. They are made to ensure your data is well protected, but it should not only protect your data, it also needs to protect your physical device, so the hardware, the reputation of the device, which is important to the company because no company wants a bad reputation,
Yeah, exactly.
as well as the product of it, such as any software or algorithms that it uses.
Hmm.
So further going on about this, we see a lot of these devices follow a CIA triad. Do we know what the CIA triad stands for?
Yeah, confidentiality, like integrity and availability.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So when we talk about those three factors, so confidentiality, meaning to prevent any disclosure of information, the integrity to ensure the data cannot be modified without detection, and the availability is when the device and data is available when it's needed. So all these fundamental principles, as you guys have stated, help in the development of the security standards for these devices. However, before we begin going into the standards and developments of these devices, which are used to protect not only you, but the device as well, what do you guys know about the history of the IoT devices?
Maybe I can tell you something about IoT
Yeah, for
history.
sure. You can elaborate on that.
Um, yeah. So when you hear the term IoT, what do you guys usually think? Like, what are your thoughts on just IoT when you hear IoT?
Internet of Things.
Yeah,
I mean,
obviously.
typically just smaller smart devices, maybe.
Yeah, the embedded systems, if you say precisely.
Yeah.
Term IoT was first coined in 1999 by Kevin, a British technology pioneer, while working at the company Protector and Gamble.
So
I
it's a
mean,
pretty recent thing. Only
yeah, we
like
can say,
20-ish
yeah.
years old.
So he was a gambler.
No, maybe. As in cybersecurity, we use IoT a lot. So gambling is not like closely related to hacking, something like that. If that makes sense to you guys. Okay, so in early 2000s, the concept of IoT gained a transaction as advances in wireless networking, sensor technology, and data analytics made it possible to connect physical objects to the internet. And you might be very surprised to know that in 2008, the number of devices connected on the internet surpassed the number of people on Earth, laying the foundation of IoT revolution.
That's a lot. That's basically like everybody has an IoT device
Yeah, I mean,
on Earth.
they are not much person than their IoT devices.
Yeah, everybody needs one now.
Yeah, and you know what was the turning point? The launch of Arduino chips. Like, it's similar to like kind of Raspberry Pi Pico that we use in our labs,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it make it easier for the developers to create IoT devices, leading to an explosion of innovation in the space as well.
Yeah.
And just after that, in 2010, the first IoT specific conference, the IoT Week, was held in Belgium, bringing together the researchers, the developers, and the policymakers to discuss about the future of IoT.
Yeah.
Who would
So
have
just
thought that
from
in 20, sorry?
yeah, so I was just saying just from that little brief point in history, it's still a very new thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
who would
Like the
have thought
first
in the recent years in 2020 we will use these devices a lot.
a lot, yeah.
I mean, I don't need to specify the reason, but you guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
And also after that, in 2011, the Google acquired NetLabs, a startup that made thermostats. And do you guys know about this? Like, do you have any information about this?
I have a Google Nest in my home.
Do
But
you want to know how much revenue was given to this startup just to make your Google Home? Any
How
guesses?
much?
I'll
I don't
say,
know.
just take a guess. I'll say higher or lower.
Okay, maybe hundreds of million.
No, that's why.
Maybe 500 million.
Oh, no, bro. That's
A
way, way
couple
lower.
billion.
Yeah, it's approximately 3.2 billion
Oh my god,
to a startup.
Oh,
Interesting.
it's
And
crazy.
yeah, and you know what? In the introduction of 5G in mid 2010s, promised to accelerate the growth of IoT by enabling faster and more reliable connectivities for IoT devices. And as I just mentioned, the IoT devices surpassed the number of users. By 2020, there was an estimated of 31 billion connected devices IoT worldwide, with
Mhm.
projections that this number will grow up to 75 billion by 2050.
wow.
Yeah, we
That's a
see
lot of
that.
IoT devices.
Yeah, we see that huge increase right at that 2020, which is right when COVID happened as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean,
When
people were homebound, and what should they do? They have to get some devices to us to connect to the
yeah,
world.
so they
Yeah, I
relied
was
on
bored as well.
technology.
Yeah. So today, IoT is being used in a wide range of industries like healthcare, just name the industry, healthcare, agriculture, manufacture, transportation, and it's transforming the way we live and work.
So
So
you
yeah, go ahead.
so you mentioned the healthcare, agriculture, manufacturing, and we see all this money being poured into IoT,
Yeah,
such as Google, how they spent like $3.2 billion.
yeah.
So what practices are used in their security and their framework and the development of it?
You mean the IoT framework
Yeah,
and the practices?
yeah.
Oh, okay. So if you talk about IoT security frameworks, there are usually 5 steps. Like these are just kind of, if you listen to these steps, these are just kind of basic steps, but these have a vast history with them. The first
Mhm.
step is identify, like identifying the potential risk, vulnerabilities in the IoT systems. And the second one being protect, implementing security measures to protect against these potential threats. And then it comes detect, like monitoring the IoT system for any suspicious activity or the breaches, for which we can use some softwares like we are familiar with the Wireshark and all that stuff we read in the
Yeah.
classes.
Yeah,
And after that, we need to respond so as to have a plan in place to respond to any security incidents that may occur, just to fix those vulnerabilities. We
yeah.
can use Metasploit. I mean, and after that, we do need to recover. Like we have to plan to recover from security incident and restore the normal operations.
For sure.
And
The recovery is very important. Like
yeah,
if something
exactly.
Definitely.
were to happen, you need to be able to make sure you can go back to normal and you're not affected too much by it.
Yeah. And as a cybersecurity student, we need how important it is just to have a great plan for recovery and to have
Yeah,
best practices for IoT security.
yeah,
Do you
exactly.
guys, what do you guys think about what are the best practices for IoT security? Like speaking of security in general.
Maybe strong authentication.
Yeah, that's a great example
For
to
sure.
have a strong passwords.
Definitely that. Yeah, good passwords, good encryption.
Yeah, securing the device hardware might be one of them, like making
Mhm.
secure hardware more secure and not susceptible to tampering or hacking. And then securing the communications, ensuring the communication between the IoT devices and other devices is secure using encryption, authentication, and authorization. And might be using different techniques, like as we all know, there are different kind of communication between the IoT devices. One of them is I2C. Like we have learned a lot about this in our classes.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
And
there's like other like two-factor authentications and all of that stuff as
yeah, and using respective measures to provide authentication to this, like those are really important. And
well.
then we can say like regular software updates, which are very crucial, like regularly updating the software on IoT devices to ensure that they are protected against the known vulnerabilities.
Uh, I've heard that you have not updated your software.
Oh, sorry,
Yes.
sorry. Yeah, I'll update it. Like, I have to update my malware. Sorry, antivirus.
Yeah, please don't update your malware.
Sorry. I mean, I am working on a malware sample for a malware class, so
Oh, okay, yeah.
I like and might be monitoring and detecting, like using monitoring tools to detect the system to detect preventive security measures might be another point for IoT security. And as I was talking about plan, we need to have a great incident response plan in place to quickly respond to security incidents and mitigate any damage. And if we talk about education, we must educate the users and employers about the security best practices and importance of cybersecurity, especially updating their software, which I will be doing after this podcast,
Yeah, I
obviously.
feel like a lot of things are issued by like employees not being educated as well. Like
Yeah, I
we
mean,
see them just opening random like emails and all of that stuff.
yeah, without even consulting the IT department.
Yeah,
Mm, And What do you guys think about regular audits? That might also be another practice for IoT security, like conducting regular security audits to ensure the IoT system is secure and up to date with the latest security protocols.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
No, for
Yeah,
sure. There should be regular audits because at least they can check as like a third party to see if there's anything wrong with the systems or anything on the devices that could compromise other devices.
yeah. Hmm. I just have a quick. I just came across this question. Like, do you guys know anything about the Canada's IoT security standards, like CSA group or something?
Mm, yeah, I have heard about it. Like for
Hmm.
those like who don't know about CSA, it is a standards organization that develops and publishes standards like for various industries, which includes IoT. Their research on IoT security standards have been influential in shaping the Canadian government's policies on IT security.
Yeah, that's right. The CSA group has published a set of IoT standards called CSA Z240,
Uh, I can
which
explain about
covers
that
various.
if you want.
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah. Like CSA, you said about that 240, right?
Yeah, yeah.
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 It is a comprehensive, like a set of guidelines and requirements for IT security. It
Oh,
basically covers the entire IoT ecosystem, including devices, networks, and data.
oh,
Yeah, some of the key requirements for this standard include strong authentication mechanism, strong communication protocols, and robust data encryption.
So very similar to what Harpreet discussed before about the best practices and the framework for the
Yeah,
security.
yeah,
yeah. Keeping your passwords up to date and all that.
Hmm.
yeah.
Secure.
It also places a strong emphasis on privacy and data protection. For example, the standards require that IoT devices should have a clear policy and obtain consent from users before collecting and sharing their personal data.
Yeah, it's great to see that Canada has something in place that takes a proactive approach towards IoT security and protecting data and the consumer. But I wonder how are these standards received by the industry though?
That's a great question. These CSA standards have been well received by the industry, especially in Canada. They provide a clear and comprehensive set of guidelines for IT security, and it helps manufacturers and service providers to ensure that their IT products and services are secure and compliant with Canadian laws and government. Yeah. But it is important to note that these standards are not mandatory, and it's up to the industry to adopt and implement them. Many companies have started to incorporate these standards into their products and services.
Oh, that's good to hear. Like, it's important for industry to take responsibilities for their own IoT security and ensuring that their product and services are secure and compliant and up to date, and so that the user's data might not be that must be secure.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the CSA standard as benchmark, we can expect to see more comprehensive and robust IoT security standards being developed and adopted in the future.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, it's good that we see that there's something in place here. So we've talked about the CSA, which is in Canada, but what about across like the world and other security standards? Do they have any other like developments that they use in theirs?
Yeah, there are several other security standards in addition to the Canadian IT security standards. Like one of the most well known is the NIST, which stands for National Institute of Standard and Technology. And its framework provides a set of guidelines and best practices for organization to manage and reduce cybersecurity risk.
Might be ISO IES, one of these?
Yeah, it is like also a globally recognized standard for information security management system, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's also one OS IoT project.
Uh, our good old friend.
Yeah, it is a like community-driven initiative like that aims to provide improve the like security of IoT devices through the creation of open source tools and resources.
Yeah. So we see all these different organizations like playing out in their development and security like protocols and everything. But what exactly like differs them? Like how are they different from each other?
These standards can differ from each other in terms of their focus, scope, and level of detail. That's why it's important for organizations to carefully evaluate which standards are more relevant to them and to ensure that they are implementing those standards effectively.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's also like worth mentioning that these standards are constantly evolving as new threats and vulnerabilities emerge. So it's important to stay up to date on the latest developments.
Hmm. Uh, if you don't mind me interrupting here, I'm just curious. Like, do you guys know any of these developments in standards and how do they differ from each other?
Yeah. So actually, we'll see like among these, there's a common theme of it. We see that it's region or country specific that sets
Oh,
out the minimal standard.
okay.
So
So it
like
depends upon like which area you're in.
basically, like we have no
Oh,
like worldwide organization that people kind of use.
hmm.
So like we see like in Canada, as we discussed, there was the CSA group. In the USA, they just introduced like a cybersecurity bill, which tells the NIST to take steps to increase the security in these devices. And then we also see in Europe, very recently, just in September, that the EU Commission launched a Cyber Resilience Act to secure IoT devices and what the minimum requirements should be for these devices. So, since there's no worldwide organization that is put into effect by governments to help secure these IoT devices, um, would there be any reason why you think they wouldn't implement anything like worldwide and it's more region specific?
Hmm. Might be the outdated devices that cannot support the IoT infrastructure. Um,
I think the manufacturers would have to make new ones or the change their IT products, which will cost them more money.
yeah, and all the different countries would not follow suits. Like minimum might meet different requirements for every region, as you just stated.
Yeah, like every region will have different networks, so different interconnectivity.
Yeah, different interconnectivity of the networks. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. These are all like valid reasons why there's a difference in the worldwide standards. Like governments just won't agree, and the politics of everything that happened today.
yeah, a lot.
And yeah, but we also see like the differences just between the USA and Europe and how they actually like punish companies for not requiring to their laws and stuff. So like when the EU introduced their guidelines for the minimum security requirements, the companies must go back every 5 years to actually keep them evolving and to update their security standards,
Hmm.
which is similar to the US, but we noticed a big difference in the EU one where they actually give a very hefty fine if they fail to meet the requirements. You guys want to take a guess of how much the fine actually is?
A million, maybe.
Like,
I mean, the
Maybe 100
maximum it
million.
can be a million.
A million? Nah, I think you're way off with a million.
So
You're
how much was it?
you're looking at, so 15 million euros or 2.5% of their global
15
annual
million
What?
revenue.
euros
Yeah,
That's
just
fraud.
as a fine?
just as a fine, or
What?
2.5% of their global revenue.
Yo,
Like I couldn't even imagine being a company that loses 2.5% of their
exactly.
global revenue. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the
Mm.
government wants money.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
Oh
we also
man.
see just like even in Canada, they have some pretty harsh like punishments as well, which they're more covered because the telecommunications are more federally regulated here than they would be in other parts of the world. They are set under the Telecommunications Act and PIPEDA, where if they don't at least meet some minimum requirements, it's an indictable offense and there's potential imprisonment time to them.
Nice.
Interesting.
Yeah. So then we see the development of these standards being different for each region on what they think is best for the people to deter them from using these devices in a malicious way, but also to keep the security of the devices developed and more like standardized.
Mhm.
So like what we've illustrated, like such as Europe having these hefty fines and Canada with imprisonment, but USA being a bit more relaxed, it's hard for these regions to compromise on what is the best way to tackle IoT security. And as we also discussed before, it's still pretty new.
Yeah, just
Like,
1999.
yeah. So to do a global effort about security for IoT is very difficult. And so it is still so there are those other organizations which we mentioned before, but it's still ultimately up to the government of these nations to put into effective security standards and develop them over time to time so it doesn't harm like other people, such as the smart locks being like broken into and
Yeah,
people being
yeah,
put in
and
danger.
to ensure that they are not compromised easily as well. Like,
Y-
it's great.
Yeah,
And talking about smart lock being hacked and all these compromises, do you get and discussing of IoT devices as well in general? Do you guys know any of these major IoT attacks? Like, I have heard one of these in 2016 known as Mary Bonnet. I don't know if you guys have heard about this,
I
but
think I have heard. Yeah.
yeah,
yeah. So in this attack, the users created a malware called Mirai, if that's pronounced so, and just to take control of over 6 lakh IoT devices
damn.
all around the globe. Like, you can just name the IoT device, routers, cameras, DVRs, and so on. And then they use these devices to launch a massive DDoS attack that disrupted the network services for millions of users. And
Wow.
the and what do you guys think might be the possible cause?
Who
Like,
knows?
Ah, there's probably multiple causes, but it's probably something that could have been avoidable, I feel like.
yeah, it's so dumb reason. Like, the
Yeah.
security measures were lacking in these IoT devices. They were lacking strong passwords. Like, they were using minimal passwords. Those were easily guessable by the hackers. Or they can just make a simple word file which can decrypt the password in like just a matter of seconds, or
Yeah.
if not minutes, like
I
minutes or
feel like
seconds.
having strong passwords is just something that like people are not getting still.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Like,
Even though it's been,
why would someone use a password that's so easy? I mean, it makes sense
yeah,
if you have to remember it in the future, but you can use a difficult password and write it out somewhere else so that you can refer it afterwards.
Yeah.
yeah,
I
like I could
use
only
easy passwords.
like
Oh,
I could
By
only
easy, I mean easy.
oh, so that means I can DDoS it as well.
Uh,
I mean,
I'm
I
just
can do that for my capstone project if you want to, if you allow me to.
you can
maybe
try.
with your maybe with your malware that you're creating, you can try something on a weak password.
Oh, yeah. Password on the malware. Shoot.
Yeah.
Do you guys know any other attack?
Yeah, yeah. I also know about WannaCry ransomware attack in 2017.
Oh, that's a fancy name.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm getting very interesting with the names.
yeah.
Yes. Very
Like
creative.
it made like over 200K computers to cry in 150 countries.
That's approximately the whole world.
150 yeah, the whole world basically.
Yeah.
Uh, including IT devices such as medical equipment,
Hmm.
and basically the attackers exploited a vulnerability in the Microsoft Windows operating system and demanded a ransom to restore the system. Again, I will ask the same question. What was the security mail like, you think?
I mean, considering my attack, like the one I just stated, the reason must be pretty straightforward and pretty easy.
Probably
Yeah,
passwords.
Yeah, probably. Is it
no,
passwords?
no, they didn't have the
Okay.
like latest security patches.
Huh?
Oh, okay. So software.
What?
I mean, the points Harpreet was talking about earlier,
Yeah, those are
the
making
basic
pretty good
mistakes.
sense right now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like, I don't know why these companies are lacking information and lacking knowledge about keeping all the passwords up to date and keeping all those
Mhm.
they
softwares up to
don't
date.
care. They don't care about security.
I mean, they are too focused in making money. Why
Yeah.
are they not focused on security?
Security takes the back seat on this.
Yeah, I mean, they can make money, but doing these foolish mistakes,
Yeah.
they'll lose all that money. I mean, we
Uh,
can see like 15 million euros as just as a fine.
Yeah, the fine, like 2.5% or 15 million euros is insane.
uh,
Yeah,
but I would say it's still too much.
But at least it's something to encourage security in a way.
maybe. Maybe they can hire us to provide them security in the
Oh
future. Who
yeah.
knows?
With our weak passwords.
Easy passwords.
Oh,
All right. So those are both like really good examples of an attack on IoT devices. But have you heard about the most recent one though?
mm, I came across these two attacks, like Fold in Finland and the Jeep attack, but I didn't really get time to deep
Which
dive
one are
into
you
these
talking about?
attacks.
I've heard a
Yes.
lot.
Okay, so
Uh,
there was one that happened in 2020, so not too long ago.
oh, during Corona.
Probably for yeah, during COVID when someone was probably at home and bored.
IoT
They it's
devices reaching their peak.
yeah. It's called the Ripple 20 vulnerability. So this actually affected like hundreds of millions IoT devices. So a lot.
So millions of
And
people were bored.
yeah. And it included like multiple devices as well as previous, such as medical equipment, printers, and industrial controllers. So basically, what happened, these hackers remotely took control of these devices and stole sensitive data and even caused physical damages in these cases. Um, did you guys want to take a guess at what the security measure that was lacking in it was?
You know, what might be the easiest thing to guess?
Yeah,
Uh, Weak passwords, not having up-to-date softwares. I mean,
exactly. The softwares were not up to date, which
oh
caused
shoot.
all these issues with the medical equipment and printers and stuff. So, yeah, so as you can see from these examples, it shows how crucial it is to implement these strong security measures, such as like software, like updating your software, strong passwords, and even encryption on these IoT devices.
You know what I'm going to do now?
What?
I'll update all of my softwares all of my antiviruses, and
All of them.
when I'll get a job, the first thing that I will ensure is that they have all the softwares up to date.
Oh yeah, and make sure their passwords are not
Oh
their name
yes, exactly. I will
or their
try DDoS
birthday.
on those passwords
Yeah,
first.
it's not their birthday or something.
Exactly. Might be the name of their girlfriend. Oh shoot, no.
So Harpreet, you
uh,
mentioned before about the IoT framework,
yeah.
and the last part that we were kind of talking about and delving into was recovering from the attack.
Yes.
So what do you guys know about the opportunities and challenges for IoT security, such as like government and the insurance? Oh, like is there insurance on these devices or how does it work for that?
Can I talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the obvious and one of the biggest opportunities is the potential for IT devices to improve our lives and make things more convenient. But I think the with that comes the challenge of securing these devices, which often lack basic security features, as we talked about earlier.
For sure. It definitely makes it more convenient, but also difficult for security inside of these devices.
Yeah, with great
Exactly.
power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great statement for this.
Yes.
Yeah, I think when it comes to regulations, they can vary from country to country. Yeah, I think Zaman, you told us about the Europe and America. They have like different regulations.
Hmm.
Yeah. But I think in terms of enforcement, it's still not properly defined. While some of the countries have government mandated regulations, but many others do not. And even if they do, but enforcing those regulations can be difficult, I think.
It would be,
Mm.
especially in some other countries, if like you don't know what smaller companies would pay attention to the regulations and what wouldn't, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think in a country like in my country like India, it will be challenge, a real challenge.
Yeah, especially
Exactly.
India's like an IT hub. They can just get around everywhere, like the government and stuff. They don't need to.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Oh,
think another challenge is the lack of consumer awareness when it comes to IT security. People often don't realize that their smart devices are vulnerable to cyber attacks and don't take like, necessary precautions to protect themselves.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
a big one, especially like consumers. They don't like, they think they just think security is there, but then they make their passwords, like as we've seen, weak and everything. Or they won't update their software. They'll wait like a whole year to actually do it because they don't want to wait
Yeah,
for it to load or something.
yeah,
So,
some of us
Yeah,
also don't do
exactly.
that.
yeah.
Exactly. And as there are some antivirus softwares that ask for some money just to provide you security, and just for the sake of not giving them money, they don't
Mhm.
update their antivirus.
Why are
Yeah.
you
Yes.
targeting yourself?
Oh, sorry. I will pay. I will pay attention to this now.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think there's also the issue of insurance for IoT devices. It's not like traditional devices like laptops and phones. I think like insurance policies for IoT devices are still under development.
Yeah, especially with it being very new and stuff, it's pretty
Definitely.
hard. Well, yeah, it's clear that there's a lot of challenges to IoT security, but there's also many opportunities for improvement as well.
Definitely. And as like technology continues to evolve, we will likely see even more challenges and opportunities arise. I mean, it's an exciting field to be in, but one that requires like constant innovation.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Like you don't know, you can't predict about the future, what can be the future for these IoT devices. But I'm truly, I truly believe that if the users are also encouraged and educated about all of these things, the
Yeah,
IoT standards might get high.
for
Like,
sure. Especially we've
yeah,
seen like even throughout this whole discussion, they are slowly implementing like minimum security standards and requirements for these devices,
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
which is good. I think COVID had a huge part in it, but
Yeah, exactly.
But I think Europe should decrease their fine.
the 15 million. I couldn't even imagine if I was a company and had to pay that.
Exactly. I mean, that's 2.5% of their gross. Why,
Yeah,
why would a company straight away lose 2.5% just doing silly mistakes?
I
I
know.
mean,
At that point, you might as well
yeah,
just leave Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
Oh well.
this was a very
So
good discussion.
yeah, so we'll wrap up this episode of the podcast here. All three of us would like to thank you for tuning in to this podcast.
thank
We've
you
dis
guys.
Thank you,
we've
guys. It was a
discussed
really
the
good discussion.
oh,
I mean,
and now everyone
from
has to go
improving our
update their
daily lives to revolutionizing the entire industry, IoT is changing the way we interact with technology with each other. Yeah, and but with this transformation power comes the need of security and responsibility as well. And you know what I'm going to do after this podcast right away?
please go update your software.
Exactly.
Don't update your malware.
Oh
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I will not.
Use it for your capstone project.
Oh, that's a great idea though.
Yeah.
Providing antivirus services in a malware. Oh, wow.
So, as we continue to explore the possibilities of IoT, let's keep in mind the importance of ethical and secure implementation. I'd like to once again to thank Harpreet and Kanwar for joining
Yeah, it's
Thank
fucking
you.
right talking to you guys.
It
and
was a
giving
nice podcast. Thank you, guys.
and giving
Thank you
such
for
great
giving me opportunity.
information. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So, just on a final note, to stay curious, stay informed, and stay connected.
Yeah, and
Thank
Europe
you.
should decrease their fine.
Exactly.
So thank you for joining.